Marcus had been asleep for precisely 3 hours and 27 minutes, according to the obnoxious chronometer blinking on his nightstand, when a loud thump at the door jolted him upright. His first coherent thought was that someone had forgotten the ancient human etiquette of knocking and had instead opted for dramatic entrance methods. The second thought, more practical, was that it was probably some maintenance drone on the fritz. The third thought, which arrived reluctantly, was that maybe the universe had finally decided to punish him for joking too loudly about interstellar regulations in the mess hall earlier that evening. He swung his legs over the side of the bunk and squinted at the door, cursing the fact that once again he had volunteered for night shifts. Marcus considered ignoring it. After all, who in their right mind would visit a midshipman's quarters in the dead of night, unless they were either desperate or insane, or both? But the thumping grew louder, accompanied now by an awkward metallic scrape that sounded suspiciously like a boot catching the edge of the threshold. Marcus rubbed his eyes and muttered, "If this is a maintenance bot, I swear I'm filing a complaint about unscheduled intrusions." Then he opened the door, fully expecting to see a spherical drone hovering in apology. What he saw instead made him forget his own name for a second. The figure on the threshold looked human enough, skin pale under the fluorescent lights, hair shimmering with a strange combination of silver and lavender, but it wasn't human. The long, delicate ears that extended from the sides of her head twitched like fine, sensitive instruments, and the tip seemed almost to pick up their surroundings in a way that made her appear simultaneously alert and nervous. Her eyes, enormous and luminescent, blinked rapidly, darting around as if scanning for invisible threats. She clutched her suit to her chest, wriggling slightly in a posture that was both defensive and apologetic, and said, "Soldier, could you please clean me up?" Marcus blinked. Once, twice, 3 times, which was more than necessary for anyone trying to maintain the dignity of a human male faced with a very polite alien woman requesting a hygiene intervention in the middle of the night. He opened his mouth, then closed it. He could think of no coherent response that would sound rational in any galactic language, so he finally settled on, come in. She stepped inside, careful not to trip over the threshold, though the attempt itself looked like a minor miracle of balance. Marcus noticed that small flecks of what appeared to be bioluminescent goo clung to her suit and dripped onto the floor with faint sparkles. He coughed politely, "Right, and this is a mess." Leora, because that was her name, which she volunteered immediately after the initial greeting, nodded, her long ears twitching with nervous energy. "Yes, very unclean. My bioresidue stabilizer failed during the last orbital transit. It's complicated." She sounded as though she'd rehearsed this explanation a dozen times, which made Marcus suspect that she might be a diplomat, a scientist, or someone who had to explain bizarre things to humans for a living. He squinted at the sparkling puddle at her feet. "Complicated is one word for it," he said, picking up a towel with mock solemnity. "I was going to say catastrophic, but let's not get dramatic so early in the night." He handed her the towel. "Try not to redecorate my floor while we do this." She gave him a small, almost mischievous smile, which Marcus found unsettlingly charming. "I cannot promise," she said. Then she sneezed, and a few tiny sparks of light shot out from her nostrils, leaving faint, glittering arcs in the air. Marcus coughed again, waving his hand. "Right, that's new. I'll add it to the station's safety report." They spent the next several minutes in a bizarre ritual of cleaning. Marcus handed her wipes, towels, and occasionally a small container of what he assumed was antiseptic, while she explained, in careful, halting English, the complicated science of bioresidue. Every time she described a molecular structure, a tendril of glowing liquid would slide down her arm and Marcus would leap back as though the substance might be sentient. She apologized each time, her ears twitching like nervous metronomes, and he kept muttering, it's fine, just don't start singing in quantum harmonics and we're good." At one point, she accidentally triggered a small device on her belt, which emitted a low hum and projected holographic constellations across the walls. The constellations twinkled, shifted, and occasionally morphed into images that bore a suspicious resemblance to various Earth animals. A particularly striking display looked like a cat doing ballet, and Marcus couldn't resist the urge to clap. "Bravo! I've never seen feline choreography represented in subspace constellations before. Quite avant-garde." Leora's ears twitched rapidly, which he interpreted as a sign of pride or possibly embarrassment. "It is a humor-based holographic overlay," she said, sounding almost sheepish. "My people use it to alleviate stress on long journeys." Marcus snorted. "I'll say, I feel better already, nothing like a glowing ballet cat to soothe the soul at 2 a.m. By the time the cleaning was finished, Leora was sparkling. The holographic constellations had been rearranged into a series of cartoonish alien creatures, and Marcus was discovering that he rather enjoyed her company despite the initial absurdity of the situation. They sat on the floor amid damp towels, sparkles, and minor chaos, and for a while neither spoke. Then Leora's ears twitched and she said softly, "Thank you, soldier, I did not expect such patience." Marcus, leaning back against the wall and pretending to be exhausted, muttered, "Patience is my middle name. Well, not legally, but you get the point." He paused, realizing he might actually be smiling. "You know, in the future, most humans would probably call security at this point, or write a formal complaint. Me, I write jokes." She laughed, a sound like wind chimes mixed with water droplets, and Marcus felt an odd warmth. "I like your species," she said, her luminous eyes twinkling. "Very humorous." Humor, it seemed, could bridge worlds. And at that moment, amid glowing puddles, holographic cats, and a very messy room, Marcus decided he didn't mind being unexpectedly woken at all. They both sat in silence after that, the quiet punctuated only by the faint hum of the station's systems and the occasional glimmer from the floor where some residual bioresidue refused to vanish. Marcus caught himself glancing at her, curious about the long ears that twitched every few seconds, as if they were tiny radar dishes picking up signals from somewhere else entirely. He wondered what kind of stories those ears had heard, what worlds they had scanned, and whether she, standing here in his room at an ungodly hour, was perhaps the strangest and most intriguing creature he would ever meet. By the time sleep crept back into his heavy lids, he realized he had almost forgotten how absurdly funny the night had been, and maybe that was precisely the point. Marcus woke to the soft whirring of machinery and the faint glow of the holographic constellations still hovering in the corners of his room. The alien woman was sitting cross-legged on the floor, carefully inspecting a small gadget that looked like a miniature star engine. Her long ears twitched rhythmically, almost as if they were scanning the room for rogue particles. Marcus squinted at the device, then back at her. "That thing isn't going to explode, is it?" he asked, though the answer felt obvious. If it exploded, the station would likely have an intergalactic incident report filed, and he wasn't in the mood for paperwork. She looked up, eyes glowing faintly in the dim light. "Not unless you tickle it in the wrong frequency," she said, and Marcus laughed before realizing she was completely serious. "Tickle it?" he repeated, raising an eyebrow. "You're saying star engines respond to humor." Leora tilted her head, ears twitching in perfect unison. In some regions of the galaxy, laughter emits vibrations that harmonize molecular cohesion. Very useful if you don't want your ship to spontaneously dissolve mid-jump. Marcus couldn't help himself. He leaned back against the wall, pretending to ponder the idea seriously. Noted, humor, essential to interstellar survival. I'm adding that to my tactical manual right now. The alien woman snorted, a sound like tiny bells. "You humans are fascinating," she said. "Your humor is inefficient but persistent, and your caution amusing." Marcus grinned. "I'll take that as a compliment mostly. Efficient caution isn't nearly as entertaining." Then disaster struck in the most unexpected of forms. Marcus had just reached for a mug of synthetic coffee when Leora gestured toward a shelf, accidentally activating a hovering cleaning drone. It zipped forward, bumping into the hollow projector and sending the constellations spinning wildly. One instant it was a spiral galaxy, the next it looked like a twerking octopus. Marcus froze, coffee halfway to his mouth. "Well, that's new." Leora flailed. "No, not the twerking octopus, that was a limited edition model from Nebula Sector 7. She lunged for the controls, ears flaring in alarm. Marcus, suppressing laughter, tried to help, only to slip on a stray sparkle of bioresidue from earlier. He landed on his back with a loud grunt, sending the mug skittering across the floor. The coffee didn't spill, miraculously, but the spectacle was enough for both of them to burst into uncontrollable laughter. For several minutes, the room resembled a chaotic carnival of flailing limbs, blinking holograms, and humming machines. At one point, a constellation of a cat riding a comet projected above their heads, and Leora pointed at it with delight. "Look, that is exactly how my cousin navigates the asteroid belt." Marcus paused mid-laugh. "I think your cousin might need a license for cosmic felines, but yes, the resemblance is uncanny." Eventually, they managed to regain some semblance of order. The cleaning drone hovered innocuously in the corner, Leora's suit sparkled without dripping bioresidue, and Marcus sat cross-legged on the floor, still wiping tears from laughter. He realized with a little shock that he was enjoying the absurdity more than he should. There was a strange kind of comfort in chaos when someone else laughed along with you, someone who understood both the danger and the ridiculousness of the universe. They settled into a calmer rhythm. Marcus pulled a small tray of synthesized snacks from under the bed, offering them with mock ceremony. Leora accepted gracefully, nibbling at a cube that shimmered like liquid crystal. "This is delightful," she said, her ears flicking with subtle approval. Marcus grinned. "I'm glad. Intergalactic cuisine, mostly edible, occasionally explosive. Consider yourself lucky tonight." As they ate, the conversation drifted from technical repairs to personal stories. Marcus recounted tales of station life, the bureaucracy of interstellar administration, the petty arguments over resource allocations, the awkward moments with alien diplomats who insisted on performing interpretive dance during negotiations. Leora listened intently, occasionally adding a comment, usually in the form of a gentle joke or a sly observation about human stubbornness. Then it was her turn. She spoke of far-flung planets with oceans of liquid crystal, deserts where the sand hummed in harmonic resonance, and cities that moved according to the tides of the planetary magnetic fields. Marcus listened, fascinated. He made jokes when appropriate, comparing her descriptions to Earth movies he had watched, but he also found himself silent at times, simply absorbing the wonder of her experiences. He realized that humor and storytelling could coexist perfectly. The laughter made the fantastical elements feel alive, approachable, almost tangible. Hours slipped by. At one point, Leora leaned back, resting her head against the wall, her long ears curling slightly over her shoulders. "You humans have an amusing way of turning crises into bonding experiences," she murmured, almost shyly. Marcus blinked at her. "Bonding experiences? I usually just call it Surviving Tuesday, but yes, bonding works too." He smirked. "We're really nailing the whole hero and messy alien dynamic, don't you think?" She tilted her head, eyes twinkling. "Perhaps, but your laughter, it is unexpected, comforting, I like it." Marcus, not used to such candid admissions, choked slightly on a crystal cube of snack. You like my laughter." Well, that's a new one." He laughed nervously, scratching his head. "I guess I'll take it as a compliment. Humans usually like jokes, rarely do we get approval for the sound of them." The room, once chaotic and sparkling with minor disasters, now hummed with a gentle quiet. Marcus and Leora sat amidst the subdued glow of holographic constellations, the cleaning drone buzzing softly in the corner, and the faint sparkle of residual bioresidue catching the light like tiny stars. Marcus glanced at her long ears, noting how they twitched now in a relaxed, almost musical rhythm. He imagined they were picking up signals from distant galaxies, translating them into her own private symphony. Leora yawned faintly, stretching, and Marcus realized he had spent the better part of the night laughing more than he had in weeks. He had also, rather unconsciously, begun to care for the alien woman in ways that surprised him. She had entered his room a stranger in need, wrapped in sparkling chaos, and by some strange cosmic accident she had brought warmth, humor, and a hint of wonder into his otherwise regimented life. Just as Marcus was about to suggest they attempt sleep, the hollow projector flickered once more. A constellation of tiny, dancing aliens appeared, waving in salute. Leora's ears twitched in amusement. "They say hello," she explained, as if it were the most normal thing in the universe. Marcus waved back. "Well, hello then," from the human side of things. And for a while, nothing else mattered except the soft hum of the station, the quiet laughter lingering in the corners, and the unlikely companionship that had formed in the middle of the night, amidst glowing messes, twerking constellations, and intergalactic absurdity. Marcus woke to the low hum of the station's environmental regulators. the faint flicker of emergency lights casting shifting patterns across the floor. Leora was already awake, sitting cross-legged on the edge of his bunk, her long ears twitching in a slow, measured rhythm that suggested she was listening to something invisible. Her eyes glowed faintly in the dim light, the subtle luminescence casting reflections that made her look more ethereal than ever. He rubbed his eyes, trying to reconcile the absurdity of the previous night with the quiet calm that now filled the room. Somehow, amidst holographic cats, bioresidue puddles, and twerking octopuses, a fragile rhythm had settled, like a carefully improvised duet. She looked up at him and smiled, a smile that seemed to stretch beyond the limits of gravity, playful but also weighted with something unspoken. "Good morning," she said, her voice melodic but tinged with human-like hesitation. Marcus yawned, stretched, and muttered, "Morning, star tickler," before catching himself and realizing how ridiculous he sounded. Leora laughed softly, a tinkling sound that made him grin, though he pretended not to. The day began like any other aboard the orbital research station, except everything was subtly transformed. Marcus found himself noticing the way light refracted through Leora's hair, the rhythm of her ears as she moved through the cramped quarters, and the way her laughter could make the most absurd mishaps feel like carefully orchestrated comedy. He realized, with mild astonishment, that he had been teaching himself to see the humor and beauty in chaos, rather than merely enduring it. They spent the morning sorting through the aftermath of the previous night's holographic mayhem. The cleaning drone hovered obediently, now more a spectator than a participant, and Leora had devised a series of stabilizing routines for the bioresidue that actually made some sense to Marcus, though he still questioned whether he would ever understand the physics of laughter harmonics she described. At one point, a cube of leftover breakfast food emitted a soft glow and hummed like a miniature reactor. Leora picked it up, examined it, and quipped, "This is alive, isn't it?" Marcus snorted. "Either that or it wants to unionize." "I vote unionize." Hours later, they were in the observation deck, watching the vast expanse of the nebula beyond the station's hull. Dust and gas swirled in colors Marcus could only describe as impossible. Teal flames tangled with violet smoke, punctuated by occasional spark-like stars that winked in and out of existence. Leora's long ears twitched, absorbing the subtle frequencies of the nebula. "You humans never look at the universe properly," she said gently. "You see points of light and call it stars, you miss the symphony." Marcus laughed. "Symphony, I usually see pointy lights and panic about collision avoidance." "I like your version better." She smiled, and for a moment, the absurdity and the wonder coexisted perfectly. The conversation shifted, naturally, toward their pasts. Marcus recounted some of his failures, moments of missed maintenance, the minor catastrophes that had earned him scorn among human colleagues. Leora did not laugh at his missteps, as humans might have expected, but instead related tales of her own cosmic blunders. A ship lost in a crystal storm, a minor meltdown in a planet's atmosphere because someone miscalculated the resonance frequency of a living crystal, and a culinary accident on a diplomatic mission involving genetically engineered protein jelly. They both laughed at the absurdity, the laughter acting as a bridge over the vast differences of species and experience. By midday, a small crisis arose, a fluctuation in the station's gravity field caused by a micrometeor impact. Equipment rattled and a few floating tools drifted toward the ceiling. Marcus instinctively reached for the emergency stabilizer controls, but Leora gently tapped his hand. "Wait, let me show you something." Her hands moved over a compact device, and the floating objects began to drift gently back toward the floor, held in place by subtle harmonic manipulation. Marcus stared, impressed. "You do realize you just made gravity look optional, right?" Leora shrugged. "Gravity is merely a suggestion if you know how to interpret it." He grinned, shaking his head. "I'm taking notes and probably stealing this trick for later." As the day wore on, they found themselves exploring not just the station, but each other's worlds in miniature. Sharing meals that were part human, part alien, and entirely ridiculous. Improvising games with zero-gravity cubes that refused to obey conventional physics, and joking about how neither of them would survive a formal diplomatic inspection without accidentally starting an interstellar incident. Laughter punctuated every misstep, and yet underneath the humor, Marcus could feel the bond solidifying, a connection built on trust, curiosity, and shared absurdity. By evening, the station's artificial sunset began to glow, bathing the observation deck in orange and pink hues that reflected off the nebula outside. Leora rested her head lightly on Marcus' shoulder, her ears curling softly, and whispered, "I am glad I came to your quarters last night. I did not know I could feel welcome so quickly." Marcus, surprised by the quiet sincerity in her voice, replied, "I didn't expect to be happy about being woken at 2 a.m., but here we are." He laughed softly and she chuckled in response, the sound blending with the hum of the station. As night fell, they returned to his quarters where the room no longer felt cluttered or chaotic, but rather like a place that had been transformed by laughter and shared experience. The holographic constellations, now calibrated and stable, projected serene images of interstellar flora and fauna, replacing the dancing cats and twerking octopuses. Marcus realized he had begun to look at the universe differently, not as a series of protocols and potential failures, but as something fluid, unpredictable, and occasionally hilarious, yet endlessly wondrous. Finally, they sat side by side, the quiet of space around them and the faint glow of the station's systems illuminating their faces. Marcus glanced at her long ears, the subtle way they twitched and curled in moments of thought or amusement, and felt a deep, unexpected affection. "You know," he said, "I think I've learned something important this night. Maybe the universe isn't supposed to be controlled, maybe it's supposed to be experienced, and preferably with someone who can make you laugh while everything's falling apart." Leora's eyes sparkled, and for the first time she allowed herself a small, genuine smile without the pretense of formal protocol. "I agree, and I am grateful you laughed with me." She leaned back, resting her head against the wall, ears folding in contentment. Marcus felt a quiet warmth spread through him, a sense of completion he hadn't expected when she had first barged into his room in panic and slime. They didn't speak for a while, letting the calm and soft humor of their shared night settle over them. Marcus reflected on how much he had changed. He was less rigid, more willing to embrace unpredictability, and had discovered the simple power of humor, companionship, and openness to the unknown. Leora, for her part, had found a human she could trust, someone who could navigate both the chaos of the station and the strangeness of her presence without fear or condescension. Eventually, Leora rose, offering a hand, and Marcus took it without hesitation. "Shall we attempt some semblance of sleep?" she asked, ears flicking with a hint of mischief. Marcus chuckled, "Yes. But I expect dream reports in the morning, preferably funny ones." She laughed softly and they prepared to rest, the room calm, the universe outside vast and mysterious, and yet for the first time less intimidating. The night had begun with chaos, laughter, and bioresidue, but it ended with understanding, connection, and the quiet realization that life, even across galaxies, was richer when shared.